again, the Mu'allaqah is just a collection like Hamas and some of the other collections that were done. I don't know who did the Mu'allaqah collection. I'm not even sure it's known. Nicholson might tell you about that. But the pretense was that these poems were so good that they were hung in gold leaf from the Kaaba, and that's where the idea of being hung extended. But most people who study these poems think they were called extended because they're long. They're very long poems. And I said I'm not sure that they're always totally authentic. It sometimes sounds like what a Persian convert to Islam might have thought a Bedouin would write about, because they have a guy, for instance, going on for about 100 lines about his camel, comparing a camel to ships in Byzantium or a bridge over the Tigris and things like that, and something you know that a Bedouin would not, imagery of Bedouin would not employ. So it's sort of like what was those when cowboys were popular in the 70s and 80s? What they call them? Not a Hollywood cowboy, but huh?
Spaghetti westerns?
No, when you were saying the guy wasn't a real cowboy, but he was making believe he was a cowboy, I forget what they would call it.
Urban cowboy?
Huh? Urban cowboy, yeah, that's right. Like an urban cowboy, like an urban Bedouin, you know. Today, for a long while, even in the Arab world, you got people wearing the headdress of different terrorist organizations had different color headdresses, and so many young men wanted to make believe they were Bedouin and stuff like that. Whereas if you live in the Arab world, you know the average Arab hates Bedouin, despises Bedouin. I've lived in the Arab world, and I would just remember the behavior when a Bedouin would come selling carpets to different houses in different settled areas. The women would shriek at them, say, "Get away, you dirty beast," this kind of thing, throw them out, have total contempt for anyone from the desert. So this idea of aping the Bedouin and stuff, it's like Americans aping the cowboy. It's as fictional as that. It's totally childish, and it has no reality whatsoever. Because the Bedouin actually live their own life, are really not very much like Arabs. Well, why are they called Arabs? A Bedouin, and an Arab is a settled city person, village person. You know, he's not a Bedouin. A Bedouin is a Bedouin, and they don't have a lot in common, and they don't mix well, and they don't like each other. And they've always been trying to settle the Bedouin, but with very little success in some areas. So, in any case, this attempt to ape the Bedouin is a very odd phenomenon, which has very little reality. Well, let's see what we have in our book here, if I can find anything, the way they bound this thing together. Okay, so that's the Nicholson thing. Where's the Kritzig? I like Kritzig's stuff better in this because it's easier to look at. Oh, here. He gives you, we have two versions of this Ode of Imr al-Qais. Now, Imr al-Qais was considered a king of some of the Arab tribes in between Arabia and Iraq, some of the border areas in the Byzantine Empire period, where they were sort of both under the influence of the Byzantine Greeks, but they were also sort of frontier states with the Arab Bedouin world. And he was one of these individuals who took to the sort of wandering life because he lost his kingdom, and there's all sorts of myths surrounding Imr al-Qais. These are the most famous one. Now, after World War I, you know, Arabs became very famous, and one of the most famous persons who promoted Arabism was Lowell Thomas, the American newsman, who promoted Lawrence of Arabia. And he used to have Lawrence of Arabia shows all over, you know, places like New York, London, the Western countries, England and America and so on, which people became fascinated by Lawrence's exploits with the Arab tribes in the First World War, in the retaking of Damascus and so on. So an actual parody of this came out in the silent movie called The Sheikh. And the Sheikh starred this famous new actor in the silent movies called Rudolph Valentino. How many have heard of Rudolph Valentino? Yeah, he was the famous silent movie actor and the heartthrob of that time. He was an Italian immigrant to America, but it was thought that American women who were not yet liberated, you know, palpitated after seduction scenarios with foreign men. And because a foreign man, of course, it always embodied sex. So Rudolph Valentino fit the bill for the dark, suave foreigner who was every American woman's dream of, erotic dream, I guess. And they put this in the context of a Lawrence of Arabia scenario. But what they were really doing was recreating Amr al-Qais. So the sheik would be sneaking into the Western woman's tent for lovemaking. And that's what Amr al-Qais is bragging about in his poem, about how he sneaks into tents for lovemaking and this kind of thing. And so the whole thing, I don't know if you used to hear that old song, I am the sheik of Araby, at night when you're asleep, into your tent I'll creep. There was an old sort of song that went along with these movies at that time in the 20s, all based on these poems. All based on these poems. Because Imr al-Qais is the poet of lovemaking. Of course, everything that was frowned upon in Islamic society later on. And so in some sense, I would think that you would get in this cultivating of this poetry by, I think, new converts to Islam, an attack on Islam by these new converts, who were not particularly enthusiastic for it, but had to come in order to function and be alive and have a life, have a livelihood, be able to function intellectually. So they cultivated these poems as you see, telling the Arabs, you're all puritanical Muslims now, but we'll tell you what you were like before you were Muslims. We'll tell you what the past was really like. And so the star of these poems is Imr al-Qais, and he's the premier Arab poet. What? Well, page. Can't you find it? You got some hands, but it's page 53 if that'll help you. But there's two sections there. Also, my handout here has it too. And in fact, there's three sections. There's one in Nicholson as well. There's three different versions of this material, so it is not a single page. But I'll trust to your intelligence, Mr. Paris, to find your version. In any